Okay, so before we get started with the Photoshop stuff, remember the L drive. Down here on the bottom of your screen, you should have a little icon that looks like a manila folder with a blue letter A in front of it. If you click on that, it should take you to this list of teacher names. That's how you know you're on the lessons drive. Okay? If you scroll down alphabetically, you'll see my name under K. Double click on it, you're going to see a bunch of stuff in here. Look for a folder called Happy Box Image Resources. This contains all of the files that I will be working with to demo. It also contains this file here called template. This is the file that you need to work from. Now, when you get these files, it is very important that you copy this entire folder. Right click, go to copy. That'll copy everything in that folder. And then I want you to go somewhere on your computer, whether it's your desktop or preferably your student account, like where your documents are. And I want you to right click again and hit paste and paste your own copy of all that stuff to your computer. And from this point on, I want you to use your own local copy of that folder. Do you understand? I do not, I repeat, do not want you to just open up the stuff on the L drive and start messing with it. Because if you do that, you're going to overwrite like the master copy. All right, you need to keep this folder like pristine so that if other people like have their work deleted or lose it or something happens, they can go back to the L drive and get a new copy of that stuff. Does that make sense? Okay. So the only thing you are to do is to open up that folder and right here, Happy Box Image Resources, right click, hit copy, go back to your computer and hit right click again and paste. And that will paste everything to your machine. Then you will be able to go to that folder. Here's my copy of it right here. Go down to template and open it up in Photoshop, and it will look like this when you do that. This is the box as it looks, like flattened out, and unassembled. So as you can see, you've got 4 sides of this box here, and I'm just going to show you some techniques and tricks over the next few days about ways you can bring images on here, fill areas with color and gradients, add some filters and textures to this, add text, and you're going to basically fill all 4 sides of this with content. And as we talked about yesterday, that content has to come from whatever you think of for your theme. So you're going to cater it to what you're doing. I don't expect anyone to know that yet. You're going to be thinking about that over the next several days. Okay? So for my purposes, I have chosen as my theme, no big surprise, Batman. And if you look at the types of images in this folder, they're from a particular TV show, cartoon show that was on about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, called Batman Brave and the Bold. So I have gone through and on Google, I have searched for images from that series. Okay, because there are a million different Batman movies and cartoon shows and comics and other things. So I had to think about which one I wanted to do. And you will have to do the same thing. You need to be specific and find specific reference for whatever you're doing. Notice I'm not mixing things up. I'm not mixing the movies with the cartoons and cross-pollinating. That's too jarring. You want everything to match aesthetically. Is that clear? So like don't mix like live action Beauty and the Beast with animated Beauty and the Beast. Like pick one or the other if that's what you're doing. Okay. So you are going to need to do this very thing, just like I've done. You're going to need to have a folder on your computer that contains all of your reference and all of your assets for this assignment. I've already gotten some other things, like I found a maze on Google that I might use as an activity, other things like that. I also have a folder full of fonts that I can use for different type, like comic style fonts. Okay. So once you have your theme selected, once you have your assets saved all together for your theme, then you're going to actually start making your box. So you will open up your own local copy of this template file, and it's going to look something like this. Or it should look exactly like this. Now, when you first open up something in Photoshop, you're going to notice that it kind of anchors things to the top of the work area like this. If you want a free floating window, and if you want to see other windows like kind of next to each other, like floaters, just simply left click on the title bar and just drag it down a little bit from the top. And now you have a floating window and you can put other things there if you want. Okay. Now I think the easiest way to do this is to I'm just going to go through all of these menus and these buttons. And some of them you know, but most of them you probably don't. So I'm just going to kind of go through them sequentially. And if we don't need to know something, I'll just say we'll skip over it. We just don't have the time to learn everything because there's too much. Okay. Photoshop is a really powerful tool and it can do lots of stuff. But we don't need to know, nearly all of it to do what we want to do. You guys can make some really nice looking professional projects, pretty similar to the real thing, just based on a few little things that I'm showing you. Okay. So once you have your file open, let's take a look at some of these menus again, real quick. File. These menus up top are like function menus. This is where you go for, opening images, editing images, changing the image size, stuff like that. All right, so file, you're going to find your new, open, save as, save, etc. up here. Like most of these are pretty common knowledge. You pretty much only need new, open, save as, and maybe print. That's about it. All these other things you don't need to know. And also, if you look on the right, you'll see that there are hotkeys for keyboard shortcuts listed. And basically, you'll get to a point where you don't even need to access this menu very much. Like if you want to save something, just hit Control S. You don't need to go up here and go File Save. If you want to open something, do Control O, etc. All right. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, one other thing that I do want to point out, if you go to Open Recent right here and scroll over, this is a listing of all of the recent files that I have had open in my last few work sessions. So if you, for some reason, forget where your file is and you can't find it to open it, if you simply go to File, Open Recent, there's a decent chance it will be listed here, and you can select it from this list and open it. Okay? So for example, if I click this and just hit R2D2, it's going to bring up something from another class, the schematic image that I had yesterday that I was working on. Okay? I'll close that out. Oh, and that brings me to another quick thing. If you open something up, let's open up R2D2 again. Do you see how it opened it up inside this window? So I don't have both of these displayed. Again, if you just left click and drag this out a little bit, now I've got two separate windows. If you want to put one window in front of the other, if they're like floating windows like this, simply click on the one that you want to bring forward. It'll automatically put it in the foreground. Okay? All right. Edit. Edit is where you're going to find undos. An undo from other programs, as you might know, is you're basically just, if you make a mistake, you hit Control Z, it's going to take away the very last mistake that you made, the very last function you did. All right. Control Z is only good for one undo. However, if you go to Alt Control Z, which is the third one down, step backward, you can do that up to, I think, like 30 times. So if you have to go back more than one step, do Alt Control Z. All right, so let's, for example, let's do this. I'm going to get my pencil tool, and I'm going to do that. If I just do it once and hit Control Z, it'll undo it. But if I do it twice, it's only going to do one of them. I have to go Alt Control Z, and it'll take away that second one. All right. Step forward is Shift Control Z, and that will go the other way. If you accidentally undo something that you want to bring back, you do step forward. Fade basically just will minimize the effects of the last thing you did. So let's go back to my pencil tool. Let's say I do that. And then I go to Edit, Fade Pencil. It'll let me fade it out. So if I want to like take the opacity down or something, or if I've done a filter and I just want to push it back a little bit, that's one thing I can do. I'll hit cancel and simply undo it. Okay. Also, fill and stroke are basically, fill is filling in a whole area with a color. A stroke is outlining the selection. Transform is really the only other thing you need to know on the edit menu. And a transformation is basically when you can rotate and scale assets. And I'll show you more on that in just a minute. All right. Is this all making sense so far? If it's not, you need to just tell me and I'll slow down a little bit. I don't want to go too fast. What? Grid. That's fine. Because what's happening is, it's actually a good question. Some of you probably still have your grid turned on from the last time. Last time you opened up Photoshop was when you were gridding your photos. So remember, if at any time you want to get rid of that grid, go to View, Show, Grid, and there you can and you can use this. Remember yesterday I was talking about designing on a grid. If having this grid helps you align things, by all means use it. You can definitely use this to your advantage and help to hang elements kind of on those grid lines if you need to. And again, you remember how to go into Edit Preferences and change your grid size around. All right. So yeah, the grid's not going to hurt anything if it's there, but if it's distracting to you and you want to turn it off, again, go to View, Show, and then just uncheck it. Okay. All right, Image. This is where you're going to make adjustments and do some other things. You can change the hue, saturation, the contrast, the dark and lightness of an image. You can take color out of an image altogether. You remember when we did desaturate, back when we did the photographs, convert them to black and white. Okay. We'll go more into this stuff later. I'm just kind of giving you a brief overview now. Layers, again, are probably the most important concept to understand with Photoshop. All right. You've got to make sure that if nothing else, over here on the right-hand side, you have your layers menu open. Okay. If you don't, go to Window and check Layers. You've got to have that open. It's very important. Right now, as you can see, I've only got one layer open, this background layer. Okay. And I'm going to need other layers. I don't want to do anything to this layer, this background layer. Okay. I don't want to put anything on it, because if I mess up on some other part of my image, I'm going to want to be able to come back to this and make a new copy of it. So the most important thing that you want to do when you start this is understand that your background layer should be untouched and should look just like this. So I'm going to want to just go ahead and duplicate this layer first thing, just to be safe, just to cover my bases. So there's several ways to do that. You can either go up to the layer menu and go to duplicate, and watch what happens over here in the layer menu when I do that. Hit OK. Now I have two of these. You might not be able to see it from the back of the room, but now I've got two identical copies. So the background layer now, I can just turn that off. And you can't tell right now because, you know, when you're dealing with layers, think of it like you have like a stack of paper, one on top of another. Or not even paper, more like clear acetate, like clear plastic, and you'll have things on them. And what's happening is the order in which these are in this list or stack is going to affect the visibility. Okay, so right now, because these two are identical, even if I turn off the one on top, you're going to see the one beneath it, so you won't be able to tell. But these little eye icons here will turn the layer on and off like a light switch. So you can turn off a layer, but it's still there and it's still part of the image. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn off this background layer now because I don't need it because I have this copy. Okay. So hopefully at this point you will have had your thumbnail sketches for your box, and you're going to start making what's on the screen match what your thumbnail sketches were. That sounded like a duck. I don't know what that was. All right. So the easiest way to select, you have these 4 selection tools up here. Okay. You've got the move tool, which is up top. That just moves elements around. And then you have 4, or really, I guess, 3 different selection options. And these all do the same thing, but in different ways. Now, let's say I just want to fill this side with a flat color. Double click here, bring up like just red, just for the heck of it. Now, I could start just painting over this, right? And trying to fill this in with my mouse. But number one, it looks sloppy. Number two, I'm covering up my line art, which I don't want to do. And number three, it's just taking a long time to do it. So instead of doing this, I'll Control Z that out. I'm going to select one of these areas. Now, the marquee tool basically will select things based on like a shape, like a rectangle or a circle. So if you have a large area that you're trying to select, you can do that. But the problem is for this, I don't have an even rectangle. You see that? I've got these extra parts here. Please turn off the duck. For a second, I thought that was coming from outside. I was like, no, it's coming from inside. All right, now, if you hold down Shift and continue dragging, you can add on to the selection. If you hold down Alt, you can subtract from the selection. All right, but again, for this particular problem, that's not going to work. I hit Control D to deselect. The next selection method down is the lasso tool. I've got polygonal and the regular lasso. A lasso will just make a freehand selection. I can just draw with it like a pencil. And if you come back to where you started, watch the little lasso icon. You see how a little circle will form once I have found the endpoint. Just let go and it will make a selection. If I click inside the selection, I can move it around. If I click outside the selection, it goes away. But again, that's really hard to do because you've got all these straight lines and it's just a pain. So that one's not going to really work. However, this third option, the magic wand, this is what I want. The magic wand will select an area based on if it's enclosed inside a defined border or if it's based on like a color. So it'll select things based on pixels. And because my template has these nice closed outlines, if I click inside, see it's very quickly and neatly clicking on each of these areas. And if I hold down Shift, I can continue to add to the selection, and very quickly I can select like everything on the box. So if you want to make the entire box one color, Just click inside all of these things. And you'll see the little marching ants there. That's how you know you have a selection active. Now, if I get my pencil tool and paint inside, you see what's happening? It's only painting inside the areas I have selected. A selection is basically telling Photoshop only pay attention to the areas inside the dotted lines. Everything else ignore. So that's one way you can color it in. But an even easier way is to fill this with a color. Now, before I do that, I want to make sure that I am putting my fill or whatever color I add on a separate layer than this. I don't want anything to be on my background layer, as I said earlier, even on my copy, because I want to keep this for selecting so I can make clean selections off of it. So go down here to this button, create new layer, click on it, watch what happens to the stack. Now I have another new layer in the stack. Now I can go to edit, fill, make sure under contents I put foreground color, because right now my foreground color is red. Hit OK. Now every place I had a selection is filled red. And the beauty of this is that now if I decide later I don't want it red anymore, all I have to do is take this layer, either turn it off or drag it down to the trash icon and get rid of it. And it's gone. And I haven't affected any other part of my image. If I decide I want to bring it back, undo the last thing I did, it's back again. Now I could also, paint on top of this or do other things if I want more than just a flat color. All right, but the important thing to keep in mind is number one, anytime you do something new, put it on a separate layer. Number two, when you're selecting things, go back to your background layer and don't put anything else on this layer. That way I can go back and still make selections. Like let's say I get rid of my selection and I want to just change one side of the box. I can switch back and forth between these layers. I can go down to the background copy, select a couple of areas, then go back up here again to fill it. So I'll pick a different color. I'll double click on this little color swatch, brings up my color picker. I can slide these sliders to choose a color family, blues, reds, purples. And then within that color, I can choose how dark or light I want to get it. And this is showing me my original, like the current color I have, and this is the one I'm changing it to. Hit OK. Now purple is my foreground color. I can simply go back up to edit, fill, and put it in. But I'm going to put it, I guess I could put it on this layer if you want all your flat colors together. Or again, make a separate layer, make a new one, go edit, fill again. Nope, that's stroke, cancel that. Hit OK. Now I've got some new areas that are purple. So when you're making these boxes, I think it's important to think in order from background to foreground. I think the first thing you're going to want to do is fill, areas with basic color and other stuff, or gradients, which I'll go over in a minute, and then kind of work from background to foreground as you're adding these elements. Is this making sense? Is everybody with me? All right. If not, speak up. Okay. So that's basically the different selection methods. The only other one that we'll probably go over is the quick selection tool. And this works similar to the magic wand, but it's a little different. This is the tool that you'll want to use if you want to um, isolate something from a background. Now, in a lot of these images here, you'll see, I'll just take this one thwack image, open it up. A lot of these images that I found, I've been lucky in that they are already against a solid color background. Like you see, this is just pure white back here. So this makes it really easy for me to just take the magic wand tool, select all the white space, hold down shift to get any areas that I miss, like inside the C here. Okay. Now all I have to do is flip this selection. Right now I have the white space selected, so if I drag this over now, it's going to look like this. And I don't want the white. So I'm going to delete this layer. I'm going to invert the selection. I'm going to go up to select and do select inverse. That's going to make it so now I have the words, the letters selected. If I get the move tool and drag it over now I've got my thwack there. Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit to make it easier to see. Okay, so anytime you can find an image like this that's already isolated and cut out, that's going to make your life a lot easier. However, life isn't always that easy. So let's find another one, and I'll show you what this quick select is all about. Let's say you have an image. Let's just take this one. We have this image of Robin here. And you want the figure, but you don't want the background. Then yeah, you could like try to get the lasso tool and draw around this, but wow, that would take forever and it would look really sloppy. You could try the polygonal lasso where you're clicking more in angles, and that's a little better, but it still is really taking a long time to do. Magic Wand, again, selects things based on color. So like, see, it's selecting all that blue, it's selecting all that red. You could hold down shift and try to select everything, but again, it's really, there's little areas that you're missing of little isolated pixels, and you'll probably have holes in your image once you bring it over, so that's not really a good fit. But if you go to quick select, the great thing about this tool is that you don't have to hold down shift. You just keep clicking and it automatically adds to the selection. And after a few mouse clicks, it will select most of your image. And the parts that you can't get that way, make your brush size a little smaller by using the bracket keys, which is next to the P key. And just keep being patient and select a little bit of this. Now I have him isolated. I can either move him over or I can copy and paste it. And there's Robin. And now I can put move the thwack sound effect above him. Right? I can go to Edit, Transform, Rotate, and I can rotate that a little bit. I can tilt it. I can go back to transform. I can scale it up or down. There's all kinds of things you can do. You can go edit, transform, skew, and make it look really wacky. Okay. When you're done, just hit enter. All right. So that's the quick selection tool. Basically, you're just going to want to use that for whenever you're trying to select something from a background. All right, so those three were the selection tools, just three different ways of selecting something. All right, the next tool is the crop tool, and you don't really need that. Again, what that's going to do is if you click and drag, it's basically you telling it you want to crop the entire image to this preview. So if I were to hit enter right now, my entire file is now that big, and that's a big mistake. No matter how much I minimize this, it's only in that preview. All right, so the crop tool, you're not going to really need that, so you can skip that. The next one down is the eyedropper tool. The eyedropper basically just samples colors. If you look down here where your color swatches are, the purple and white, watch what happens to that purple when I click here. Oh, actually, it's set to the background color. I think there's a way to change this somehow so that it samples the foreground, but it's okay. Let's try the color sampler tool. Maybe that'll do it. Okay, yeah, color sampler. If you open that up, it actually gives you your RGB values and CMYK values, which I know that means nothing to you right now. But if you want to get a specific color and you don't remember exactly what it was, if you click on the color sample tool and just click on that, it will give you the color values, and you can like enter those in and then recreate a specific color. Like if you're trying to tell somebody, I want this color, and they're like, well, I don't know how to get it, that's how you can match it up. Okay. And it saves the, see that little, if you can look closely, you can see it left little markers there, 1 and 2. Those are the two areas where I clicked, so that way it keeps a record of that. By the way, all these pull down menus, if I just click and hold, it brings out all these extra things. I really haven't used much of these other tools like the ruler and the 3D material and all that stuff, so I would just not worry about those. Healing brush and spot healing brush are really just there to bring back areas that have been changed or erased or something. You probably won't really need to know that, so you can ignore it. The pencil tool, I've been using that already. Pencil and brush tools, pretty useful. Again, if you want to change the size of the brush, use those bracket keys. Left bracket makes it smaller, right makes it larger. And also, if you go up top here, and I went over this before, but I'll review it again. Notice how every time I click on a tool, this information changes, because this little second row down here are the tool options. So if you want to change any aspect of the tool that you're working on, change the parameters, that's where you do it. So for the pencil, if I click on here, I can also change the size by using the slider. You can also change the hardness of the brush, and that just means how crisp of an edge that you have on it. I usually leave it set to 0. And you can do other things with these brushes. You can make a softer, kind of a faded, what's called a dithered edge, or a crisper hard edge. You can have a round brush or more of a oval brush. There are dry media brushes that make it look like it's like kind of charcoal on the edges. There's all kinds of effects you can get with these brush parameters. So if you want to play around with them, great. You don't have to. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is that if you are using a brush, if you hold down Shift while you're using it, you can make straight lines. See how soft that edge is? You might not be able to tell from back here. That's because I have a soft-edged brush. If I want to change to a hard edge, I click one of these, and now that's got a much crisper edge to it. Okay. All right. I think that's it for today. I've got a couple more minutes, but I'll go ahead and stop now. Is there any questions before we end for today? Yes.